Disclaimer. This material is for entertainment purposes only, and for no other purpose. Please consult a legal professional for proper legal advice, including understanding what this document means. Please consult the actual legal document for all legal uses. This presentation is no substitute for the actual filed document. We cannot help you if you do not follow this simple, reasonable, and good advice. Please let us know about any errors in this presentation so that we can correct them. Unfortunately, we cannot and will not correct any errors made in the underlying documents, so please make sure the error is a presentation error. Thank you very much for your time, support, and interest. We hope you enjoy this content. Sponsors. Unfortunately, there are no video sponsors or channel sponsors at this time. If you would like to sponsor us, please reach out. All donations are welcome. Thank you. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and share this video with others. Doing this will help us reach other interested people, and will help to support this channel. We appreciate your action. Thank you. Appendix 1. Government Agency Preparation for and Response to January 6. Introduction. The Select Committee investigated the facts relating to law enforcement entities' preparation for, and response to, the January 6 events at the Capitol, including the character of the intelligence prior to the insurrection. This appendix does not address the cause of the attack, which resulted from then-President Trump's multi-pronged effort to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Prior to January 6, numerous government agencies received intelligence that those descending on the mall for a rally organized by the president were armed and that their target may be the Capitol. The intelligence community and law enforcement agencies detected the planning for potential violence directed at the joint session of Congress. That intelligence included information about specific planning by the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers militia groups who ultimately led the attack on the Capitol. By contrast, the intelligence did not support a conclusion that Antifa or other left-wing groups would likely engage in a violent counter-demonstration, or attack President Trump's supporters on January 6. Indeed, intelligence from January 5 indicated that some left-wing groups were instructing their members to stay at home and not attend on January 6. As January 6 approached, some of the intelligence about the potential for violence was shared within the executive branch, including the Secret Service and the President's National Security Council. That intelligence should have been sufficient for President Trump, or others at the White House, to cancel the ellipse speech, and for President Trump to cancel plans to instruct his supporters to march to the Capitol. Few in law enforcement predicted the full extent of the violence at the Capitol, or that the President of the United States would incite a mob attack on the Capitol, that he would send them to stop the joint session knowing they were armed and dangerous, that he would further incite them against his own vice president while the attack was underway, or that he would do nothing to stop the assault for hours. Nevertheless, as explained below, and in multiple hearings by the Committee on House Administration, there are additional steps that should have been taken to address the potential for violence on that day. Discussion. Intelligence received by government agencies. On December 19, 2020, President Trump tweeted, "Big protest in D.C. on January 6. Be there, will be wild." Following President Trump's tweet, an analyst at the National Capital Region Threat Intelligence Consortium, NTIC, noticed a tenfold uptick in violent online rhetoric targeting Congress and law enforcement. The analyst also noticed that violent right-wing groups that had not previously been aligned had begun coordinating their efforts. These indications reached the head of the D.C. Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, TEMA, Christopher Rodriguez, as well as incoming Chief of D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, MPD, Robert Conti. Chief Conti remembered that the information prompted the D.C. police to change the way that we were going to deploy for January the 6th. Following President Trump's "Be there, will be wild" tweet, Director Rodriguez arranged a briefing to provide the D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser the latest threat intelligence about January 6, outline the potential for violence, and make operational recommendations, including that the mayor request assistance from the D.C. National Guard. During the briefing, the mayor was told that there is greater negative sentiment motivating conversation than the last two events in November and December of 2020, and that others are calling to peacefully storm the Capitol and occupy the building to halt the vote. As early as December 30, in its intelligence briefing entitled, "March for Trump," the U.S. Secret Service, USSS, highlighted the president's will be wild tweet alongside hashtags #WeAreTheStorm, #1776Rebel, and #Occupy Capitals, and wrote, "President Trump supporters have proposed a movement to occupy Capitol Hill." It added that promoters of the January 6 rally on social media had borrowed the president's phrase and were marketing the January 6 rally as the wild protest. Other law enforcement entities were receiving similar indications from both government and private entities. By December 21, the U.S. Capitol Police, USCP, had learned of a surge in viewers of online maps of the Capitol complex's underground tunnels, which were attracting increased attention on www.thedonald.win, alongside violent rhetoric supporting the president. By the late afternoon of January 5, 2021, Capitol Police Assistant Chief for Intelligence Yogananda Pittman urged Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund to convene a brief call to discuss a significant uptick in groups wanting to block perimeter access to the Capitol tomorrow starting as early as 0600 hours. Chief Sund remembered discussing those indications and the preparations Capitol Police already had in place, and that everybody seemed fine with utilizing the resources we had. Chief Sund added that, by that time, he had already deployed all the available resources. The Federal Bureau of Intelligence, FBI, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Office of Intelligence and Analysis, DHS-I&A, were also aware of the increased online interest in the Capitol tunnels. The FBI's special agent in charge of the Intelligence Division at the Washington Field Office, Jennifer Moore, pointed out that there was nothing illegal about discussing the tunnels. Without a very specific discussion of violence, it was a matter of ensuring that the appropriate law enforcement partner agencies were aware of the uptick, ensuring that the Capitol Police were aware. People's First Amendment rights, obviously, are protected. We can't just troll the internet looking for things that's out there, Moore said. So it would have to be with such specificity and such planning and such detail that we would be able to open a case, immediately seek authority for an undercover, have enough probable cause for that undercover off of one tip would be tough. Other agencies were also surfacing indications and receiving tips. On December 26, 2020, the Secret Service received a tip about the Proud Boys detailing plans of having a large enough group to march into D.C. armed and will outnumber the police so they can't be stopped. It stressed, their plan is to literally kill people. Please take this tip seriously and investigate further. On December 24, the Secret Service received a compilation of social media posts from SITE, a private intelligence group. One of them urged that protesters march into the chambers. Another, referring to President Trump's December 19 will be wild post, wrote that Trump can't exactly openly tell you to revolt, so the December 19 post was the closest he'll ever get. Another understood the president's tweet to be urging his supporters to come to Washington armed. Others were to the same effect, there is not enough cops in D.C. to stop what is coming, make sure they know who to fear, and waiting for Trump to say the word. By December 28, that compilation had reached the newly installed head of the Capitol Police Intelligence Unit, Jack Donahue. The same day, a self-styled internet expert who had been tracking online far-right extremism for years sent an email to the Capitol Police Public Information Inbox warning of countless tweets from Trump supporters saying they will be armed, and of tweets from people organizing to storm the Capitol on January 6. She added, January 6 will be the day most of these people realize there's no chance left for Trump. They'll be pushed to what they feel is the edge, noting that many would be armed and that she was, for the first time, truly worried. Other senior Capitol Police officers do not recall seeing that email before the January 6 attack. The next day, Secret Service agents forwarded to Capitol Police warnings that pro-Trump demonstrators were being urged to occupy federal buildings, march into the Capitol building, and make them quake in their shoes by our mere presence. In addition, on January 1, 2021, a lieutenant in the intelligence branch of the MPD forwarded to the Capitol Police Intelligence Unit a tip, later forwarded to USCP Deputy Chief Sean Gallagher, that he had found a website planning terroristic behavior on Jan 6, during the rally. The source included a link to www.thedonald.win site, describing a detailed plan on storming the Capitol in D.C. on Jan 6. On January 2, 2021, the FBI saved in its system a social media post stating, "This is not a rally and it's no longer a protest. This is a final stand. Many are ready to die to take back #USA. And don't be surprised if we take the hashtag Capitol building, sick. On January 3rd, FBI and Capitol Police received a Parler post that afterwards we are going to need a new Congress, and Jan 6th of May actually be their last day in Congress. On January 4th, Jack Donahue, head of USCP's Intelligence Unit, and his Assistant Director, Julie Farnham, briefed Capitol Police leadership, including Chief Gallagher and Chief Pittman, but not Chief Sun, about the January 3rd threat assessment, which highlighted that Congress itself was the target of potential violence on January 6. Assistant Director Farnham explicitly warned the group. Supporters see this as the last opportunity to overturn the election. There was disappointment and desperation amongst the protesters, and this could be an incentive to become violent, because they have nothing left to lose. The targets are not the counter-protesters, the target is Congress. The protests are heavily publicized. Stop the Steal has a propensity for attracting white supremacists, militia groups like the Proud Boys. There are multiple social media posts saying that people are going to be becoming armed, and it's potentially a very dangerous situation. On January 5, 2021, at 12:19 p.m., the architect of the Capitol Head of Security, Valerie Hasbury, forwarded an alert to Capitol Police Incident Command that an individual was calling on thousands to go to Washington Jan 6 and help storm the Capitol, adding, "We will storm the government buildings, kill cops, kill security guards, kill federal employees and agents." There is now chatter on Parler about storming the Capitol, Ms. Hasbury wrote to a ROC employee working at the USCP. "Please let me know if there are any updates to credible threats." Within an hour, she was advised by her staff that there is no talk about any credible threats or storming the Capitol. That same day, representatives from DHS, FBI, SEMA, Secret Service DC Police, and Capitol Police shared notice of the website, Red State Secession, that urged its visitors to post the home and work addresses of Democratic members of Congress and political enemies under the title, "Why the Second American Revolution Starts Jan 6. It asked for their routes to and from the January 6 congressional certification because the crowd will be looking for enemies. The FBI was uploading to, and tagging in, its system incoming information from all FBI field offices about January 6 under the label, CERT Unrest 2021. While the incoming information was reviewed on a regular basis by the Washington field office, unified monitoring of the items in the aggregate didn't begin until January 5. That same day, the FBI captured a January 6-related threat that warned a quick reaction force of Trump supporters was preparing for January 6 in Virginia with weapons and prepared to respond to calls for help in the event that protesters believed the police were not doing their job, and a situation incident report from FBI's Norfolk field office warned of a war on January 6. While Capitol Police leadership received neither warning until after the attack, Assistant Director Farnham, USCP Intelligence Unit, warned that Congress would be the target on January 6. She noted that a sense of desperation and disappointment may lead to more of an incentive to become violent. Unlike previous post-election protests, Congress itself is the target on the 6th. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, remembers Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist expressing a similar view based on the social media traffic in early January 2021. Norquist says, "The greatest threat is a direct assault on the Capitol. I'll never forget it." Discussion of the potential for violence. Federal and local agencies agreed that there was a potential for violence on January 6. As noted above, the intelligence leading up to January 6 did not support a conclusion that Antifa or other left-wing groups would likely engage in a violent counter-demonstration, or attack President Trump's supporters on January 6. In fact, none of these groups was involved to any material extent with the attack on the Capitol on January 6. That said, certain witnesses testified that they believed that there would be violence with Antifa or similar counter-protest groups. President Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, said the White House saw a risk of violence from counter-protesters. Then acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf said that his main concern, at the time, was what we had seen throughout the summer and throughout the fall, which was you were going to have groups on either side, and so you were going to have counter-protests. And usually where those counter-protests interacted was where you had the violence. General Milley said the potential for violence was clear to all, everyone knew. "I can't imagine anybody in those calls that didn't realize that on the 6th was going to be the certification of an intensely contested election," And there were large crowds coming into town, and they were coming in to protest. And everybody knew there was a probability, more than a possibility, a probability of violence. He expected street fights when the sun went down, while Deputy Secretary Norquist said the most dangerous thing was assault on the Capitol. Director of DHS Special Operations Christopher Tomney remembered, there was broad discussion/acknowledgement that folks were calling for bringing weapons into the city on that day, so there was no surprise, there was no one disagreed that there was going to be the high likelihood that there could be some violence on January 6. Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue described the discussion about the threat landscape as generally about left-wing, right-wing, or pro-Trump, anti-Trump groups coming to the Capitol. It didn't really matter what they called themselves. It was a matter of they're upset, they're coming to the Capitol, and there's a potential for violence. Donahue added, everyone knew what everyone else was doing. Everyone knew that there was a danger of violence. Everyone knew that the Capitol and other facilities were potential targets. And I think we all felt comfortable that we were aware what the situation was, and we had the resources in place to address it. Operationalization of January 6 related intelligence. Preparing for January 6 required coordination among the several local and federal law enforcement agencies that have distinct authorities and jurisdiction over adjacent areas in the Washington, D.C. area. These range from the MPD, United States Park Police, USPP, and USSS to the USCP. D.C. Government Preparation. December 30, 2020, SEMA Briefing. Following the D.C. SEMA's December 30 intelligence briefing, Mayor Bowser, anticipating that President Trump's December 19 will be wild. Tweet would have a big effect on the number of people coming into the district, agreed with SEMA Director Rodriguez, who thought the intelligence was showing that we needed to posture ourselves, we needed to brace ourselves, and we needed additional resources in the city, particularly the D.C. National Guard. MPD Chief Conti, who attended the December 30 briefing and was seeing similar intelligence, concurred with the request for the D.C. National Guard. In light of the upcoming holiday weekend, SEMA Director Rodriguez wanted to expedite the D.C. request for National Guard assistance. On December 31, Mayor Bowser requested the assistance of the D.C. National Guard to assist the MPD at traffic points within the city. Mayor Bowser's request explicitly limited National Guard assistance to non-law enforcement activities so that the MPD could focus on the civil protests, and specified that Guard troops should not be armed. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy approved Mayor Bowser's request. By this time, D.C. SEMA Director Rodriguez had fully activated SEMA and coordinated with federal, state and local partners, to deal with consequence management. On January 4, Mayor Bowser held a press conference and invited the MPD, USCP, and USPP. Mayor Bowser announced that she had activated the D.C. Fire and Emergency Management Services, D.C. FEMS, in preparation of the January 6 event, and that the D.C. National Guard would assist MPD at traffic points and with crowd control. Mayor Bowser urged D.C. residents to stay out of downtown on January 5 and 6, acknowledging the possibility of violence. She stated that, while people are allowed to come into our city to participate in First Amendment activities, D.C. officials would not allow people to incite violence, intimidate our residents, or cause destruction in our city. The next day, Mayor Bowser sent a letter requesting that federal agencies coordinate with the mayor's office and the MPD in their response on January 6. The letter plainly stated that it was intended to ensure coordination among the agencies involved. D.C. SEMA Director Rodriguez testified that there was a concern, in light of the federal response to the previous summer civil justice protests, that in the event that activities on the street escalated, the city could once again become militarized, and that armed military and federal law enforcement personnel could be brought into the district, perhaps intimidating residents. D.C. FEMS preparation. Mayor Bowser also activated D.C. FEMS, Fire and Emergency Medical Service Department, several days before January 6. D.C. FEMS focused most of its attention on the event at the Ellipse, since the permits indicated it would be the largest event of the day, with an estimated 5,000 people attending. Other D.C. and federal agencies believed the number would likely be closer to 35,000. This led D.C. FEMS to establish an area command for the Ellipse, including a mobile command unit, 6 ambulances, 4 engine companies, and a first aid tent staffed by George Washington University medical staff. MPD preparation. After the DC SEMA's December 30 intelligence briefing, MPD Chief Conti ordered full deployment of the department, canceling previously scheduled days off, fully deploying the Civil Disturbance Unit, and contacting police departments in Montgomery and Prince George's counties in Maryland so that their forces would be pre-staged at certain locations. Chief Conti also staged police at the White House and Lafayette Park. Chief Conti said that although the MPD are normally not fully deployed for civil disturbance for counting votes at the U.S. Capitol, obviously, as we got closer from the time of the initial December 19 Trump tweet leading up, with all of the rhetoric that's out there on social media, people were going to bring guns, we're going to do this and that and so forth, that caused us obviously to change the way that we were going to deploy for January the 6th. Because of the numerous social media posts about guns, MPD also posted signs on the National Mall indicating that possession of firearms in Washington, D.C., was illegal and would be prosecuted. U.S. Capitol Police Preparation. On January 3, the same day Capitol Police's Intelligence and Interagency Coordination Division, IICD, issued a threat assessment indicating that Congress itself is a target. Chief Sund called House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul D. Irving to discuss requesting the D.C. National Guard to assist in policing the Capitol's perimeter. Chief Sund needed approval from the Capitol Police Board, which consisted of Irving, Senate Sergeant-at-Arms Michael C. Stenger, and the architect of the Capitol J. Brett Blanton. Chief Sund remembers that Irving responded immediately that he did not like the optics and that the intelligence did not support the request. Irving, however, remembers Chief Sund calling him to say the D.C. National Guard had offered 125 unarmed National Guardsmen to the USCP and MPD. He also remembered that, during a conference call, Chief Sund told Stenger and him that the National Guard would be utilized in similar fashion to the assistance provided to the D.C. police, namely, staffing intersections, and for traffic control to free up officers, but then could be used for crowd control, although he acknowledged that the Capitol campus does not have many intersections in need of staffing. The Capitol Police Board, including Chief Sund, later agreed that a request for the D.C. National Guard would not be necessary, particularly if the USCP was in an all-hands-on-deck posture. Chief Sund agreed with Stenger and Irving that the intelligence did not support a request for D.C. National Guard assistance. According to Irving, Chief Sund did not believe the National Guard would add much to the USCP security plan for January 6. Chief Sund briefed the Capitol Police Board on the USCP's enhanced security plan, and all-hands-on-deck posture including 1,200-plus officers, added Civil Disturbance Units, CDU, an enhanced Containment Emergency Response Team, CERT, and an expanded perimeter. Chief Sund did not believe, based on the intelligence he had, that it was then necessary to cancel officers' days off. USCP leadership did not create a department-wide plan for the January 6 event. In retrospect, Chief Sund believed there should have been a plan for the joint session of Congress inside the Capitol to reflect all the planning and all the coordination that goes on inside the Capitol. Government Agency Preparation. Interagency Coordination. In the Appendix on Deployment of the National Guard, we describe certain reasons why the deployment of the National Guard was delayed, highlighting the activity of Secretary of the Army McCarthy and how he understood an order given by Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller. In our interviews with Department of Defense (DoD) officials, they testified that they had asked the Department of Justice to serve the role of lead federal agency, meaning to lead the coordination and the response on January 6. The Justice Department does not command National Guard units. Department of Defense, Department of Justice, DOJ, and Department of Homeland Security, DHS, officials testified from each agency's perspective about the discussions concerning which department would serve as a lead federal agency. Notably, these discussions occurred at the same time President Trump was offering the acting Attorney General position to Jeffrey Clark, replacing then acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen. Had Clark ultimately been appointed, and had he been placed in charge of the federal security response to the violence on January 6, the situation could have been materially worse. January 3 Coordination Call. Realizing that there had not yet been a coordination call among the federal agencies engaged in planning for the January 6 events and related contingencies, Acting Secretary Miller convened one for January 3, because nobody else was doing it. In addition to DoD officials including General Milley, DOJ, DHS, Department of the Interior, DOI, officials participated. Acting Secretary Miller's objectives were to ensure that everyone had the same perception of the threat and then figure out how to synchronize, coordinate. He also wanted to make sure that DoD was prepared for any additional requests for support. Director of DHS Special Operations Tomney remembered that participants discussed the threat outlook and estimated crowd of up to 30,000, not large for the district. The consensus was that 8,000 to 10,000 police officers would be available on January 6, a force regarded as appropriate for up to 1 million protesters. General Milley asked the police participants on the call whether they needed any other assistance from the Department of Defense. General Milley and Secretary Miller expressed concern about the number of groups requesting permits and the attendance of groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who, as Secretary Miller explained, had conducted acts of violence in the past. General Milley asked whether requests for permits could be declined, canceled, or permits revoked. Participants from the Department of the Interior responded that that wasn't an option. According to Director Tomney, DHS felt confident in the United States Secret Service's ability to protect the White House and Vice President, the Federal Protective Services (FPS), ability to protect potentially affected federal buildings, as well as the Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection's ability to augment FPS, if needed. General Milley and the other DoD participants left the call reassured that the law enforcement agencies involved were prepared for January 6. During the January 3 call, the DoD also raised the issue of a lead federal agency. General Milley noted the desirability of a law enforcement lead for coordinating the interagency planning and response effort, given the potpourri of jurisdictions and diversity of agency authorities. Secretary Miller testified that he believed he and Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen were in agreement that the DOJ should lead interagency coordination for January 6, although when asked during the call, Rosen did not confirm that the DOJ would play that role. The question of a lead federal agency remained an open, unanswered question at the end of the January 3 call. The same day, Rosen was attempting to secure a White House meeting with President Trump regarding the imminent appointment of Clark in his stead. Deliberation on agency roles. On a January 4 interagency call with the same group, Acting Deputy Attorney General Donahue made the DOJ's role clear: it would take the lead in certain areas of responsibility, although he stressed that the DOJ was never designated lead federal agency and could not serve in that capacity. On the evening of January 4, the FBI established a Strategic Information Operations Center (SIOC) at FBI headquarters, which became operational on January 5. Unlike the previous summer civil protests, DoD did not have a representative at the SIOC. All the DoD officials who were interviewed by the Select Committee, however, believe that the DOJ agreed to take, and may have been assigned by the White House, the lead coordinating role. Director Tomney, however, remembered that the DOJ participants neither agreed to, nor explicitly declined, the lead agency role. During the January 3 and 4 calls, General Milley, according to Donahue, noted that there should be plenty of police forces available without using federal military troops, so he was adamant that no active duty troops would be deployed on January 6. During this call, participants also discussed whether there was a need for a police-based quick reaction force and concluded that the size of the MPD and USCP police forces made that unnecessary. According to Donahue, at the end of the January 4 call, it was clear that everyone understood what everyone else's responsibility was, and everyone understood what was available to them if they needed more resources to meet their responsibilities. The calls had also given local and federal law enforcement entities the chance to voice any issues, concerns, or requests for Department of Defense support if they felt that they were incapable of handling at their level. So, institutionally, there was agreement on the threat assessment and the plan going forward. The DoD's leading role during the January 3 and 4 calls had, in fact, left Acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf with the impression that DoD was the lead agency. As they were coordinating phone calls, they were setting agendas for phone calls, and they were calling out different people. Okay, what do you need? So they were quarterbacking the situation and the response. Agency actions on permitting. 3 organizations in the National Capital Region handle permits for organized activities depending on where the planned activity is to occur. The USSS issues permits for the ellipse, while the DCMPD issues permits for the area around the ellipse. The USCP handles permitting for activities on the Capitol campus. All 3 entities, as well as other law enforcement agencies, communicate about applications for permits and the expected number of attendees. They are reluctant to deny permits for what appears to be First Amendment protected protests. The USCP received, evaluated, and approved 6 group permit requests for January 5 and 6 activity on Capitol grounds. On December 19, the day of President Trump's will be wild. Tweet: Cindy Chafian, spokesperson from the 80% Coalition, applied to the MPD and USCP for a permit to hold a rally. On December 29, Chafian applied to USPP for a permit for a January 5 rally in Freedom Plaza. The next day, Kylie Kramer filed for a permit for Women for America First to hold a rally for up to 5,000 people on the Ellipse. On December 31, the National Park Service, NPS, held 2 meetings with Chafian as well as the MPD and USCP. Then, on January 1, the USSS confirmed that President Trump would attend the January 6 rally at the Ellipse, prompting USPP to provide additional support for the rally. On January 4, Women for America First requested that the NPS increase the authorized attendance at its rally to 20,000 from the 5,000 in the original application. The same day, reacting to the USPP briefing that 5,000 people were expected, Joseph Roth, the USSS site lead, commented that he found it funny that this permit says 5,000 people when they have said 30K repeatedly. On January 5, the NPS issued a permit for 30,000 participants for the Ellipse event. At no point was any permit granted for a march from the Ellipse to the Capitol. The president planned to announce that march spontaneously. At the White House, the increased crowd estimate concerned Bobby Peede, director of Presidential Advance, who emailed White House Deputy Chief of Operations Anthony Ornato, noting that the USSS was planning on using only 12 magnetometers. Peede added that the mag issue is a pretty major problem if the expected crowd shows up. Secret Service documents reveal internal discussion of an initial USSS assessment that 17 magnetometers would be needed. On January 6, only 10 magnetometers were initially assigned to the Ellipse. Agency preparations for January 6. January 5 Congressional briefing by Chief Sundin Paul Irving. On January 5, Chief Sund briefed the chairperson of the Committee on House Administration, CHA, Representative Zoe Lofgren, along with numerous staff, as well as House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving. Given CHA's oversight of the Capitol Police, this was an opportunity for the chair of the committee to hear from the security professionals on the security plan. Chair Lofgren's staff director described it as a top-line briefing that covered various aspects of the security plan, including Chief Sund's direction of all hands on deck, his focus on the prospect of counter-protesters, as well as Chair Lofgren's concern that members of Congress speaking at the Ellipse that day could incite protesters. After the briefing, the CHA staff director specifically asked about the availability of the National Guard in case it was needed. Chief Sund said that the Guard could be activated with an emergency declaration from the Capitol Police Board, but they are here. They are a phone call away, and if we need them, they are ready to go. Speaker Pelosi did not receive a similar briefing, but her chief of staff was given a readout of Chief Sund's briefing to Chairperson Lofgren. On that basis, as well as the assurances Chief Sund provided, the Speaker's chief of staff said, "So I believed and the Speaker believed the security professionals were in charge of the security and they were prepared. We were told that there was a plan." Federal agency response on January 6. Although intelligence was available suggesting potential violence at the Capitol, it was not apparent exactly what President Trump would do to provoke the crowd at the January 6 Ellipse rally. Chief Sund, for example, drove into work on January 6 believing that preparations for the day's events were sound and that there was no extraordinary risk or threat. "You know, on my way in, I called Inspector Glover with MPD just to get a read. He said he was actually parked over by the Ellipse. Asked him, 'Hey, how are things going over there?' He said, 'There's big crowds, lots of people in line,' but right now he wasn't seeing any concern with the folks that we had. So that was my initial take," Sund told the Select Committee. Throughout the morning, Robert Engel, the special agent in charge of the President's Secret Service detail, received updates from the event at the Ellipse. At 10:35 a.m., an update informed Engel that 20,000 attendees had been processed and outside of the magnetometers, but that there were several thousand on the mall watching but not in line. An hour later, Engel forwarded an update to White House Deputy Chief of Operations Ornato, informing him that 30,000 attendees had been processed. Acting Attorney General Rosen met with FBI leadership for a briefing that morning. He remembered this briefing, unlike previous ones, as more of a situational update, adding that the DOJ was going to hope for the best, prepare for the worst. At 10:43 a.m., Acting Deputy Attorney General Donahue received an email from Matt Blue, Acting Chief of the Counterterrorism Section, stating there are no credible threats as of the 10 o'clock brief. 12 minutes later, Rosen spoke to White House counsel Pat Cipollone via phone. Acting Attorney General Rosen admits that in hindsight no one at the department contemplated how bad that afternoon turned out to be. Nobody in the DOJ leadership could have predicted President Trump's actions that day. The president's speech at the Ellipse began just before noon. David Torres, head of the USSS's Protective Intelligence Division, PID, insisted that the Secret Service was not listening to the president's speech, however PID agents monitored the speech throughout. At 12:20 p.m., Farron Paramore, Assistant Director of Strategic Intel and Information, SII, sent an email to USSS leadership that POTUS just said that he is going up to the U.S. Capitol to watch the vote and asked whether this is true. Secret Service Executive Kimberly Cheadle responded he said it, but not going, to our knowledge. Minutes later, the USSS Pike warned that Mogul just mentioned in his speech that he would accompany the protesters to the Capitol, with a note that Dad Torres requested this be sent for awareness. At 1:14 p.m., the USSS Joint Operations Center, JOC, sent an email designating a response team to accompany the president in his march to the Capitol, per his announcement at the Ellipse. The JOC notes, multiple reports of armed individuals with various weapons and malicious intent. Be on your guard. At 12:24 p.m., while the president was speaking, the vice president, with his USSS detail, departed the vice president's residence for the Capitol. After being routed to the Senate side due to the protests, the vice president's detail arrived at the Capitol at 12:38 p.m. and was inside the Senate chamber at 12:54 p.m. Around 1 p.m., Chief Conte notified Mayor Bowser about the discovery of a pipe bomb at the Republican National Committee and of the Capitol perimeter breach. Within minutes, Mayor Bowser was at the Joint Operations Center with Chief Conte. They tried to contact Chief Sund and sent command officials to Capitol Police Headquarters. At approximately 12:59 p.m., once the violence had begun, Chief Sund first called Deputy Chief Jeff Carroll of the MPD, which provided almost immediate reinforcements. Approximately 10 minutes later, MPD officers arrived at the West Front balcony to assist the USCP officers. Chief Sund's next call was to the House and Senate Sergeants-at-Arms to request National Guard resources. As the violence at the Capitol escalated, DC FEMS realized that they were facing an expanding incident with the potential for mass casualties, fires, active shooter, and hazardous materials incidents that would exceed the resources at hand. As violence escalated at the West Front, non-lethal grenadiers began launching chemical munitions at the crowd. Around the same time, the USCP discovered a nearby truck containing firearms and Molotov cocktails, as well as a second explosive device at the Democratic National Headquarters at 1:07 p.m., while Vice President-elect Kamala Harris was inside. Responding to these incidents required a commitment of significant USCP resources for mitigation and to evacuate nearby buildings, preventing their deployment to the Capitol to help secure the building. Chief Gallagher recalled that it started to really unfold into an investigative, heavy on the investigation of let's pull up the cameras. Let's try to get an image of the pipe bombs. Let's get the images to our law enforcement partners. Let's try to play back the cameras and see if we can identify anybody that placed these pipe bombs. Let's get the owner of the vehicle, run the vehicle information for that suspicious vehicle. So we were coordinating all of that type of response that was from our investigations division. We also had our EC team trying to run down as much information, working with our investigations division as they could, on the suspicious vehicle, the tags of the vehicle, stuff of that nature. Not including those in the command center, the incidents would require the response of 34 USCP personnel, with additional assistance provided by the FBI and ATF. USCP's senior leadership at the command center and in the intelligence division also divided their time between the escalating threat to their officers at the Capitol and the explosive devices elsewhere on campus. The next update to the DOJ was at 1:17 p.m., after President Trump had finished speaking at the Ellipse. After several attempts, Acting Attorney General Rosen got in touch with Acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia Michael Sherwin, who was at the Ellipse. Rosen admits he was not very concerned with the situation at the time, because it was early, but at least the initial report was, crowd size doesn't appear to be unexpected, and the conduct so far is okay. He had only watched the end of the president's speech. It was early afternoon before the DOJ's senior leadership began to realize the extent of what was occurring. Acting Deputy Attorney General Donahue remembered hearing protesters outside the Department of Justice marching down Constitution, going from the Ellipse toward the Capitol in the late morning, early afternoon, but wasn't specifically monitoring the protests as there were a million things going on. At the same time, the president was pressing his request to go to the Capitol. According to Robert Engel, the head of his Secret Service detail, President Trump asked to go to the Capitol once they had gotten into the presidential SUV. Engel denied the president's request and returned to the White House. The committee has significant evidence regarding this period of time. President Trump, nevertheless, persisted in his request to go to the Capitol. A 1:35 p.m. entry in the USSS Civil Disturbance Unit's time log shows that the plan was to hold at the White House for the next 2 hours and then move the president to the Capitol. Soon after, Engel emailed USSS leadership from the West Wing to say they were discussing options and setting expectations. Minutes later, after receiving an email from USSS leadership saying that it would not be advisable for the president to go anywhere near the Capitol, Engel responded, "We are not doing an OTR to punch bowl." Mayor Bowser also spoke directly with Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy, who informed her that they had not gotten a request for National Guard assistance from the USCP. Mayor Bowser informed Secretary McCarthy that she did not have the authority to redirect the 340 D.C. National Guard troops at traffic points across the city, but that she had already deployed the D.C. MPD and FEMS to the Capitol. Because she and Chief Sund had not connected, Mayor Bowser concluded that the security of the Capitol was now a responsibility and requested National Guard assistance. At the end of this call, Mayor Bowser believed that Secretary McCarthy was running her request up his chain of command. USCP Chief Sund was concerned when the explosive device was discovered near RNC headquarters but did not then believe there was a need to change the USCP's operational posture. Minutes later, when a large group of rioters approached the outer west perimeter of the Capitol, Chief Sund raised the alarm and began to reposition his officers. When we looked up, and I saw them approaching the officers that were standing, right there on the barrier, I looked over to Chief Thomas and I said, "Chad, where's CDU? Get CDU down there now." The USCP timeline shows that at 12:55 p.m. all available officers were directed to the west front of the Capitol. Then, at approximately 1:25 p.m., FBI Deputy Director David Bowditch received a report about the pipe bombs at the RNC and DNC. Bowditch testified that the FBI considered the possibility that the DNC and RNC bombs were possible distractions. At 1:28 p.m., USCP requested the OC deliver 400 additional bike racks to the east front to serve as protective barriers, even though rioters were using bike racks as weapons. The pipe bomb discovery at the DNC prevented the OC from delivering them. Chief Gallagher was surprised that the violence had escalated so fast. The amount of violence that immediately took place when that crowd of 30,000, 35,000, whatever the number that was estimated to come was, that did catch, I think, caught Capitol Police and all of our partners a little off guard with how violent they were and how quick they were. At 1:49 p.m., DC MPD Commander Glover declared a riot on the west front of the Capitol. Cruiser 50, "We're going to give riot warnings. We're going to give riot warnings. Going to try to get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot," Commander Glover yelled into his radio. 1,349 hours. Declaring it a riot, the dispatcher responded, which allowed a change in the type of equipment the MPD could use in responding to the violence. While the violence continued to escalate at the Capitol, the USCP leadership focused on three things: 1. Requesting support from local and federal law enforcement agencies nearby. 2. Planning for and coordinating with arriving reinforcements. And 3. Protecting congressional leadership and other members of Congress. Chief Sund was still making other calls to other agencies for support: ATF, FBI, you name it, Secret Service. Yogananda Pittman, Gallagher's direct supervisor, told the Select Committee that she took roles that day beyond her responsibility as Assistant Chief of Police for Protective and Intelligence Operations. So I started to take Protective Services Bureau resources, as well as the Chief's staff, to set up operations adjacent to Headquarters Building, specifically Lot 16, so that we could have a check-in procedure for those units so they could stage vehicles," Pittman said. "Because like we know now, there were breaches on both sides of the buildings and these folks are inside of the Capitol. So you have to deploy them with your officers. They don't know the layout of the land. We're telling them to respond to North Barricade. They don't know the North from the South." Just after 2 p.m., when the Capitol was breached, Assistant Chief Pittman turned her full attention to the protection of congressional leadership. Meanwhile, the USCP officers at the West Front were overwhelmed. Commander Glover praised the actions of his fellow law enforcement officers that day but also noted a lack of leadership. He observed that the USCP officers he encountered when walking toward the Capitol's West Front seemed to be very hectic and scattered, with no clear direction, fighting for every inch on the line, capable, but without a whole lot of command and control. When it became clear to him that securing the Capitol would require additional resources, Chief Sund requested the assistance of the D.C. National Guard. During a 2:30 p.m. call set up by SEMA Director Rodriguez, the USCP specified the support they needed from the Guard. Mayor Bowser also made 2 urgent requests of the President that she communicated to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. One was for the National Guard's assistance. The other was that the President make a statement asking people to leave the building and to get out of the city, to stop. At 2:56 p.m., Meadows told Mayor Bowser that the President had approved the request and was going to make a statement. At the Justice Department, it had become clear by early afternoon that the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Donahue first became aware of the Capitol breach when he walked into Rosen's office and saw on television that the rioters were in the rotunda. Rosen turned to him and said, "Do you see this? Do you see what's going on? Can you believe this?" At 2:14 p.m., the Vice President's detail had alerted Secret Service over their radio channel that the Capitol building had been breached and that they were holding the Vice President in his Senate office. About 5 minutes later, the detail reported that the rioters had gained access to the second floor and that they would need to relocate the Vice President, despite the Vice President's objection. 5 to 7 minutes later, after confirming that the route was safe, the lead agent on the Vice President's Secret Service detail reasserted the need for the Vice President to leave his Senate office. At 2:24 p.m. President Trump tweeted, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done." At 2:25 p.m., the Vice President and his detail left for a secure location. Vice President Pence refused to leave the Capitol for his residence and remained in the secure Capitol location until the Senate and House floors were cleared around 7 that evening. At 2:29 p.m., D.C. MPD Commander Glover transmitted an emergency radio message, "Cruiser 50. We lost the line. We've lost the line. All MPD, pull back. All MPD, pull back up to the upper deck ASAP. All MPD, pull back to the upper deck ASAP. All MPD, come back to the upper deck. Upper deck. Cruiser 50. We've been flanked. 10 to 33. I repeat, 10 to 33 west front of the Capitol. We have been flanked, and we've lost the line." Commander Glover later told the Select Committee that a 10 to 33 indicates an immediate need for emergency assistance for any officer, life or death at that moment in time. "That's when that line on the north side finally just broke and we just lost it, and we kind of got overrun behind us." When you hear that in general daily activity, it's like the radio stops and you're focused on getting to that officer, wherever they are, because you know it's that bad, that they're fighting for their life. Something they're perceiving or seeing or realizing is that their life is in immediate danger. Donahue left Rosen's office to go to the FBI's Strategic Information and Operations Center, SIOC, across the street at the FBI's Hoover Building. Before he left, Donahue remembers someone at SIOC telling him Capitol Police say they don't need help at this point, they've got it covered. When Donahue arrived at the Washington field office, he found FBI Deputy Director Bowditch in a conference room by himself on the phone with a senior FBI official. After a brief discussion, Donahue and Bowditch agreed that they should both go to the Capitol to evaluate the situation firsthand. Donahue remembered that they arrived at the assembly area on D Street. Donahue called Rosen to say that he and Bowditch were going to the Capitol. Around this time, Bowditch says that he received a call from Senator Mark Warner, who said this is a mess, and we now have the vast majority of the Senate in one room. Bowditch recalls the number being about 87 senators, and that he directed the FBI's Baltimore team to protect that room, recognizing you have almost the entire Senate in one room. Bowditch also directed a SWAT team to Senator Mitch McConnell's office, in response to a call from McConnell's staff informing him that rioters were kicking in their door. On arriving, the SWAT team found that McConnell's staff had reached safety. At 3:25 p.m., Rosen spoke to Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer about the ongoing crisis. A video of the call shows Senator Schumer imploring Rosen, "Get the president to tell them to leave the Capitol, Mr. Attorney General, in your law enforcement responsibility." A public statement that they should all leave. As the day's crisis unfolded, Mayor Bowser activated the D.C. Mutual Assistance Compact with neighboring jurisdictions for law assistance support and spoke to the governors of Maryland and Virginia to solicit additional National Guard support. At about 3:30 p.m., Mayor Bowser spoke to congressional leadership, including Speaker Pelosi and House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. Then, around 4 p.m., Mayor Bowser, MPD Chief Conte and Army Secretary McCarthy met in the Joint Operations Center at MPD headquarters. At 4:30 p.m., Mayor Bowser held a press conference with D.C. SEMA Director Rodriguez as well as Secretary McCarthy. Mayor Bowser also declared a 6 p.m. curfew for the district. Vice President Pence, who remained inside the Capitol, called Acting Attorney General Rosen at 4:34 p.m. to ask what the DOJ was doing and what more the department could do to help. Vice President Pence told Rosen that the situation at the Capitol seemed then to be improving. The head of his USSS security detail recalls overhearing the vice president asking USCP Chief Sund, over the phone, whether it would be possible to go back to finish the business of the government this evening. At 4:42 p.m., the head of the vice president's detail emailed the USSS Office of Protective Operations that the vice president was confirming with Chief Sund that it would take days to sweep and reopen the Capitol. Congressional leadership continued to push to return to the Capitol to continue certifying the electoral votes. Senior DOJ and FBI officials, including Rosen, Bowditch, and Donahue, held two conference calls. Donahue remembered that the first, at 6 p.m., was a law enforcement-level call with General Daniel R. Hokanson, Chief of the National Guard Bureau, and focused on the role of the D.C. National Guard. The second call, at approximately 7 p.m., included Speaker Pelosi, Leader McConnell, Leader Schumer, the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, and General Milley, as well as other congressional leaders. During that call, FBI and other law enforcement officials on the ground provided an updated timeline for clearing the Capitol to hopefully get in an hour later. At 8:05 p.m., the U.S. Capitol Police announced that the Capitol building was clear and that Congress could resume counting electoral votes. Shortly after members returned, Donahue left the Capitol. D.C. FEMS statistics help describe the scope of the January 6 riot at the Capitol. Over the course of the day, D.C. FEMS reported 22 EMS responses, 14 EMS transports, including 2 cardiac arrests and 2 critical injury transports. There were an estimated 250 injured law enforcement officers from numerous agencies. 114 USCP officers reported injuries. 5 police officers who were at the Capitol on January 6 died in the days following the riot. Federal and local law enforcement authorities were in possession of multiple streams of intelligence predicting violence directed at the Capitol prior to January 6. Although some of that intelligence was fragmentary, it should have been sufficient to warrant far more vigorous preparations for the security of the joint session. The failure to sufficiently share and act upon that intelligence jeopardized the lives of the police officers defending the Capitol and everyone in it. While the danger to the Capitol posed by an armed and angry crowd was foreseeable, the fact that the President of the United States would be the catalyst of their fury and facilitate the attack was unprecedented in American history. If we lack the imagination to suppose that a president would incite an attack on his own government, urging his supporters to fight like hell, we lack that insight no more. And the best defense against the danger will not come from law enforcement, but from an informed and active citizenry. Thank you for your time. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and share this video with others. Endnotes are shown, but not read.